Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Great to have you back. Hope you and yours are well. Been another interesting week and lots to talk about. It is the week, of course, where the famous ifs, no buts referendum, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let me get the crew in right away. Let's start with our man from Coatbridge, who's normally in North Dakota. He's such a jet setter. He's now in Jamaica.
How you doing, man? Things are pretty
Not
cool
as well
here, I
as
have
you.
to say. Oh,
Not
it's
as well as
magic.
you.
Absolutely magic. Sitting here with good friends, one of my oldest and dearest friends, Jan, who moved out here, and her husband, Lloyd, who was one of the Drifters, a singer with the Drifters. So it's like, we're down at the bar late. I've been down at the bar, obviously, yesterday.
Were you under the boardwalk?
Down by the sea, indeed. It was splendid, and it is literally, it's on the beach, so that's magic.
Great.
Absolute
Wonderful.
magic.
Wonderful. And over there in Old Ricky, we've got Mr. Quinnan, of course.
How you doing, Roddy? How you doing, Phil?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Sound man.
I'm well.
It would be good.
Been a busy week, you know.
It'd be better if we were
Marking
in
my
Jamaica.
cross in those papers all week.
Be better. And up in Clickmannon, we've got our favourite lawyer.
Hi, Roddy. Well,
Hey,
my scenery is almost as nice as that of your other two friends. They're looking up to the Ochil Hills, but I can barely see them for the rain and the mist. But still nice and picturesque.
There we go. And we're hoping that Yvonne was going to join us. She was on a train to York, and the storm, was it Babette it's called or something, the storm? I preferred it when it was Storm Ballbag. It was easier to say. So Ballbag 2 storm, and our train got rediverted back up the East Coast. So she may join us at some stage, but not to worry. We have other better ones. We have up there at the East Coast, we have two of our favourite people. We've got Leanne Tervit there.
Hi, Roddy. How are you?
Always better for seeing you. Always better. How about you?
Thanks for having me on again. I mean, you wait all your life to go into Prism, and then you get on twice in a matter of a couple of weeks. It's good going.
What can I tell you? How's your mum?
She's good. She'll just be grabbing something to eat just now, filling me full of cups of tea.
Good. We'll send her regards and love to your mum when you speak to her later. And of course, we've got Mr. Allan Petrie, the good guy from Dundee. How are you doing, Allan?
Hi, Roddy. Not too bad. Bit of dreich, windy here in Dundee. We have just been hit by that storm. But it's great to be back on Scotland's favourite chat show.
You're so kind, young man. Your check's in the post. But it is. This is quite a week. I'll start with you, Phil. I mean, I was really quite surprised when you booked a holiday this week, Phil, because this was the week of the no ifs, no buts referendum. Shame on you.
Yeah, well, it's because I knew it wasn't going to happen. We all knew it wasn't going to happen. She's a liar. She's conning us, and it's when you look at MI5 intervention and who, look at the list of individuals that have been employed. The author of the vow, the guy who wrote that vow and now running our media and then put forward for even more senior position. Then the MI5 incumbents, and you just see the sellout and the absolute. I mean, in previous days they'd be hung, drawn, and quartered for being traitors. Now they just they get a bonus, a promotion. It's what the wake up. It's so frustrating, so irritating to see continuing. So obvious what's happening here, and yet people turn a blind eye to it and continue that loyalty that is honourable to a degree, but has long since served its purpose. We really, it's time to stop being loyal to the SNP and either fix it or move on. Because we can't continue like this. It's a con. It's a lie. We're lying to the people. We're if we don't speak out for what we believe to be true and stand up for what we know is right, then we're culpable. What do they say? All you need for evil men to succeed is for good men to do nothing. We cannot do nothing, folks. It's not an option.
It is a kind of kick in the gut, Leanne. We all knew, Lloyd, that this wasn't going to happen, but when it comes round, it just rubs your nose in it a bit, doesn't it?
I think what I find extraordinary about it, Roddy, is in any other circumstance where a government has made a promise, a party has made a promise, it doesn't deliver it, but the opposition parties are entirely silent. Why is it that the Labour Party, the Tories, the Lib Dems, in fact, even the Greens, why are they not shouting and screaming about the failure to deliver on the independence referendum? I'll tell you what I think. They know very well this current leadership of the Scottish National Party has no intention whatsoever of moving to a position that will deliver the independence of our country. And it does not suit the unionist parties to deploy that argument just yet. So there's silence on their part, there's silence on the media's part, and this just tells you we are being played in an extraordinary fashion by forces way beyond either the pay grade or the intellectual level of the leadership of the Scottish National Party. This is out of their hands. There was a comfortable response from Jamie Hepburn when this got briefly mentioned in a scrum at conference from one of the reporters. To which point Jamie Hepburn pointed at him and said, "Ah, you nearly got me there." That was one of the most revealing things. One of the most revealing things about this current leadership. They know that everybody else knows they've no intention of delivering, but there is an omerta, there is a pact of silence between the media, the opposition, and the SNP leadership, because the opposition know this leadership is not capable of either delivering good government nor its central tenet, which is the deliverance of independence. Watch this space in the next 6 months for the unionist parties beginning to deploy that very argument. Why didn't you deliver the independence referendum? So they can watch them drown in their own words because they have no answer to that question.
It is quite worrying. Allan, did you have a sort of mild thinking, or what if moment in the 19th when you woke up? Can't hear you, mate. You're on mute. There you go.
I mean, just now we're suffering from Storm Bobbit, but this all started with the hot air tornado of Sturgeon that's done more damage than this storm has. I mean, 20th of October this year, we should have been getting together, ready to get independence and eradicate the poverty that's hitting so many of our citizens. Instead, the SNP dangled more carrots in front of the people, and that's all it was. They're interested in the gravy train. We're interested in the locomotive to get through and fix this country, because it's desperately needing fixed. Too many people are living out on the streets. Too many people are in low-paid jobs. They're removing workers' rights. We should have been setting up just now to get our written constitution in place and negotiate with Westminster to get out of that union.
Agreed. Leanne, as I said earlier, we all knew a long while ago it was never going to be. Did you have any wee feelings on Thursday of thinking, I should be at a polling station helping people vote yes?
No, I went on Twitter and obviously had a wee laugh at some of the comments and that. But to be honest, it's not a laughing matter. When she made that speech, I think it was July last year, saying the no ifs, no buts. It's not just carrot dangling. People say that it's dangling carrots, and that it's not. It's offering people hope and then just taking it back, taking it away from them. It's horrific. She chose her words wisely as well. You can hear it as she doesn't actually offer the ref. She's offering carrots. She's offering hope and taking it away. We knew it was never going to happen. We knew the Supreme Court was a dead end. Just taking us up cul-de-sacs and back again. If some people, on the whole, that they're not as politically savvy as we are, we could see it coming. But if you're not going into things deep, then hearing somebody saying a no ifs, no buts referendum, it's offering them hope. They're thinking that that's it, we're getting our independence, we're going for it, and they just snatch it back. And there's only so often that you can do that before the voters think no more. And it's shown in all the recent by-elections and that the voters are saying no more.
Eva, I've got to say the leadership, I haven't heard, maybe I missed it, I haven't heard anyone from the SNP even apologising to the people of Scotland for what happened. Did you?
They not only do they not apologise, they blame it on Westminster because they think we're all that stupid we've forgotten that it was they who went to the Supreme Court in London in the first place. I stayed up late last night watching the election results, and going through my head the whole time was, why the hell am I wasting my time watching the telly to see what happens in 2 by-elections down in England when the result will make not one blind bit of difference to the way of lives of the people of the country that I love, Scotland. So what we're going to get rammed down our throats for the next few months is that Labour are on an upsurge, and the competition between the SNP and Labour will be to do with how they can best improve Scotland, and the SNP will bore us to death by talking repeatedly about preserving devolution and addressing the cost of living crisis, and they'll think the rest of us are half daft when we answer that the answer to all of that is Scottish independence. So I think that every single member of the leadership of the SNP just now, and also those who would have been leader, should be apologising to the people of Scotland for their sheer and utter inability to grasp the day, seize the day, and actually have the momentum, the bravery, the courage, the stamina to lead the country to independence. As we've said so many times before, all it needs is a united front. So there should be an apology to the whole country, followed immediately by phone calls to all the leading leaders, or to all the leaders of the independence movement within and out with political parties, so that that constitutional convention can be sitting next week, not next month, next year, or next decade, or not when I'm absolutely in my dotage, but right now, where those of us alive in Scotland can look forward to a better country, a safer country, a warmer and more prosperous country than the graveyard it will be for so many of us if the current position is left to moulder and wither on the vine. I think Alex Salmon said the other day that the SNP had given up the right, they'd abdicated the right to pretend to be the leaders of the independence movement, and he was absolutely right. They've lost the seriousness of intent that they used to have. Their grassroots still have it up to a point, but the leadership, there's a way back for them, but it's not going to be there forever.
No, it is not. Phil, you had a choice to go to Jamaica or go to the SNP conference, and lo and behold, you chose Jamaica. But it would seem that a lot of people missed it. Techie, can you put up the picture of Nicola in 2014 receiving the acclamation of the people in the SDCC in dear old Glasgow town, where it started? And then here's where it started, eh? Look at that crowd, 12,500, I think it was. And the years were good. And now, look at the bottom right there, folks. There is the crowd at the Aberdeen, a one floor, not even the whole hall, just one wee section, hardly any bums and seats. That's still how it's going. They can't blame Alapa, they can't blame the ISP, they can't blame Westminster. This is self-inflicted.
It is, and it's as Eva said, carpe diem. We seize the day. That's what we should be doing, and it's what we did under Alex. And as soon as it was handed over, it was like slipped through our fingers deliberately. That's the problem. I mean, contrast that the euphoric feeling we had. We belonged. We were represented when Alex was in charge, and in the early days of Nicola, we felt we're on the march, we're a people on the move. We mobilised, we had that phenomenal feeling of belonging and everybody facing the right direction. That is the Yes campaign. That's why it was so successful, because we were in it. It doesn't matter what political leanings you have. You could be left, right. It didn't make any difference. If you knew that the best thing for the people of Scotland and for the country was for it to master its own affairs and take command of its own situation in the future, then you knew you were part of something that was heading in the right direction. We were going together, we had the momentum, and we had them on the run. And then at the last minute, we lost it, just very narrowly, and we know the hollowness and emptiness. But we knew we could do it. We've that knowledge, and everybody knows that we can win this. So what we got now is that indicator when you look at the poor crowds turning up. Why? Because you don't have that euphoria, you don't have that sense of belonging, and you're not represented. Why? Because the SNP have sold us down the river. They no longer represent the will of the people to gain our independence, and it's becoming more and more evident, and the gravy train continues to be well served by those few who are on it, to the cost of the rest of us, and critically, and to their eternal shame, the poverty that Allan spoke about earlier on, and the pain. I know that Eva's been talking about, Leanne's been talking about it, Eva, Yvonne, Lloyd, we've all been talking about it. It's appalling. It's an absolute disgrace that this is allowed to continue, and it's on your watch, and you're to blame. So you in the gravy train for the SNP selling us down the river and avoiding independence, and instead going for this nonsense that is further devolution. We know it's a lie. It's so obviously a lie. Stop cheating us and start doing what you were elected to do, which is get us independence. And if you don't, get off the train, get off the gravy train, or we'll rip you from it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lloyd, we in this programme have all spoken from different parties and none that Scotland United was the way forward. United movement into, as Phil's been describing, the yes movement again and get moving. That has now gone. With the best will and the intention in the world, it cannot be carried without the SNP. They've made it abundantly clear they're standing on their own. They don't want anything to do with the yes movement, although they expect the yes movement to vote for them. They have killed the chance of a united Scotland fighting on a united front. They and they alone have done that.
They have by their actions, Roddy, but I'm firmly of the belief that the fear that went out, not just across this so-called United Kingdom, but across the other areas of the world that have an interest in Scotland's future, that the fright they got in 2014 led to a greater concentration of mines, particularly from the North Atlantic and from NATO in Brussels, that required the Scottish National Party to be diverted onto a different path. The influx of members in late 2014, early 2015, without a proper vetting system, led to the party being effectively overrun by certainly many people I've come across who are clearly bad actors in this circumstance. And I don't mean that they work for somebody else, they're just too venal. Those of a venal nature were allowed a free pass onto every potential election at the Westminster election in 2015, and we're seeing the result of that now. They've manipulated the party into a situation where, by their managerialism, and it was managerialism that led to the tiny, tiny number given, there's supposedly 72,000 members of the Scottish National Party, for less than 10% of them to be in attendance at conference, just shows you there's no excitement in the movement, there's no excitement in the party. People are disengaged, and that has been part of the plan. If you read what happened in particularly Quebec, post the first independence referendum in Quebec, we have had done to us exactly what was done to the Quebec independence movement. The energy has been taken out of it. Its rise in power led to an influx of people who had no real interest in the central principle of the Parti Québécois and the movement in Quebec. But then that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 year period of no action leads to demotivation, and demotivation is continued when you have only managerial types leading your party. They can't excite people. They can't excite people in any way whatsoever. And in some ways, maybe we're quite lucky that this leadership is not attempting to lead us to independence, because under this current leadership, what would lead the people in Craigmillar and Niddrie or Muirhouse or Lochee or Abbeyview to actually go out and vote? You know, why would they go out and vote for a bunch of people who, frankly, think they're better than the people below them? It's a terrible situation that we're in. But what we need to look out for is this agreement by the media and by the opposition parties not to talk about the failure of the independence movement because of the failure of the Scottish National Party.
Yeah, Allan, they've sent out so many mixed messages. We go back to January 2020 when Sturgeon said, "Oh, we're going to have a constitutional convention." I'm going to say it didn't happen. Then we're going to have a referendum, no ifs, no buts. Well, if that doesn't work, we're going to have a plebiscite election general down at Westminster, and that's changed again. And we've gone full circle. And it seems the policy that came out of their conference this week is they're going to lose seats, but win the election and ask for another mandate for to get a referendum from Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer or whoever the hell is in the English Parliament's big seat. It's just a farce.
That is, it's total farce. I mean, when you started this question here, you said 2014 where it started. That's where Alex Salmond left the party in very good shape. Nicola Sturgeon has destroyed that now. I mean, you see from the numbers. We're a competent government. We've got an incompetent government now. That's the important things that people look at for when they're going to vote. Now, Scotland United have not lost hope on this yet. I've lost hope on Parties United. But in 1992, John Major's Tory government, which was very unpopular, Labour were odds-on favourite to win that election. But they didn't. Tories got back in. And that then started the Scotland United campaign for a Scottish Parliament. And within 8 years, we had our Scottish Parliament because Scotland united behind a cause. And I think we could have a Yes United. But they're going to have to do the same as what they did in 2015. When they found out Labour had betrayed them, they moved. The SNP have now betrayed them. So they now have to move into a party that is really genuinely going to get them independence. And at this present time, that is Alpa. For too long, we've listened to the rubbish coming through their conference. I mean, what's the point of the SNP conference? It says in their constitution that they cannot bind their elected members to any decision. It's always been that. Even when I was in the SNP, that was part of the constitution. So there's nothing they can do for when they're in Westminster. But what they can do is start moving motions, showing people how an independent Scotland can work and better their lives. But they're just not interested. They're just trying to get around this gravy train and see how they could work within the system that's here.
The problem is, Leanne, that's what we need to be doing now. The SNP should have been turning around and saying, we're now going to go and tell people, it's like the bullseye. Here's what you could have won. We need to be promoting the benefits of independence. Now, we know that the polling shows that while the SNP's popularity is dipping, the independence support is holding steady and is above 50%. But to get it even further, we need to be going into the schemes and the housing estates and the residential areas and saying, here's what we can do.
Definitely, Roddy. I was actually planning on just being a sort of one-man party and going up upside Abbeyview and Tooke and Brucefield, all the schemes in the area. I've got a bunch of voter registration forms and information on voter ID and just try and get people registered to vote. But it's really quite difficult just now. I mean, you've had years of bad governance. Everybody's knocked down. Everybody in the schemes is completely knocked down. They're really, really struggling. You see it week in, week out, or the suicides and deaths. It's picked up here. What have they got to vote for? We've got to take this case to them. But how can we? Because the last 8 years, it's just made everything worse for them. We've got to get back in there. We've got to promote things, but we've got a really difficult job. We're fighting. We're climbing uphill. We've got an uphill battle now. Trying to get people fired up again. People have just lost interest, and no wonder. It's been so hard for people. They've made an absolute mess of the past 8 years. How do we fire them up again? How do we get them interested? The SNP members aren't even interested now. They can't even turn up to conference. Even the cabinet ministers can't even turn up to conference. So trying to get everybody else motivated is really quite a difficult task. And it's up to Alba going out and doing that. SNP had their Summer of Independence. Where was it? Was it a Believe in Scotland rally that was in direct opposition to the All Under One Banner? That was their Summer of Independence, was one day. It's just we are fighting a really, really hard battle now to get people engaged, people voting. giving them hope again, because this hope has been fired out time and time and time and time again, and they just keep getting it absolutely knocked down.
Yeah, in fact, I believe that Believe in Scotland are holding a conference on the same day as the Alapa conference this week, next weekend. Yeah, they're really trying to unite the movement.
Yep.
Eva, the lack of hope, the lack of direction. But if with 72,000 members, we know that from some of the votes at the conference, there was something like 500 votes getting cast out of 72,000 members. Now, if they can't enthuse their own members, 400 or 500 out of 72,000, what bloody chance have they got of enthusing the voters?
The current SNP leadership is never going to enthuse the voters because they don't know how to do it. And that's because they're out of touch with the ordinary man and woman in the street. And their priorities seem not to be the priorities of the vast majority of the population of this country, as we've said ad infinitum. We've spoken at length about the poor legislation that they've passed. We know all the examples of that, ranging from the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, which they should ditch, immediately. That would start to heal the independence movement if they would just get rid of that stupid challenge to the Westminster government. They had to ditch the highly protected marine areas consultation legislation because it was badly managed. The deposit return scheme should have led to Lorna Slater being sacked ignominiously. £85 million squandered. Now, I don't really want to be flagging up the amount of money that this iteration of the Scottish Government has wasted. You only have to look at the scandal of the ferries to see that. But we don't want them to continue to waste any more, like they did in the reverse wind auction, selling our wind farms or our wind power for far less than it was actually worth. So the current Scottish Government has to be replaced by people who are competent, who know the job that they're supposed to do, and they listen to the people about what the people's priorities actually are. There's a lot of easy stuff that could be done overnight by rewriting budgets and by consulting with folk who know how to do the job. The comprehensive school meals is a blinking good start for a lot of people in poverty, but so are measures directed to assist the single working poor, because they're the people that are most often overlooked, especially men. Single men live, pretty difficult lives if they're on a low wage or they're unemployed. They're not socialised or sociable the way that perhaps women can be. The mental health issues, drugs-related issues, alcohol problems that we've spoken about so often, they're difficult to tackle, but there are answers. There are multidisciplinary approaches to all these areas of life in Scotland that would make life better and give hope to people who really need it, to vast swathes of the population, in fact, who suffer either directly from poverty or indirectly from its impact. And it's not just about flinging money at it. That, in a way, is the last thing you need to do. What you need to do is look at people's actual needs, what it is that they're doing without. And for a lot of people, it's decent housing. We should have a huge house building operation where we have a national house building corporation. There is no reason why we don't have that other than a lack of political will. That assists people immediately if they're living in a comfortable home. If we've got a national energy company, or at least we've got subsidised energy, then that makes a massive difference too. And the biggest thing out of all of this is to be able to explain to people that there is a purpose behind listening to folk like Leanne when they encourage them to register to vote. And the point of voting is to put your trust in people that you believe will give you and yours, whether it's your friends, your neighbours, your family, your children, a better life. Nobody can say that about the current Scottish Government because they've become inept, incompetent, and in some regard quite laughable, if it weren't so tragic. So there are lessons to be learned here by the people of Scotland, and the answer is not voter apathy, as we've seen in England or we saw in the Rutherglen by-election, nor is it to vote Labour again, because what you'll get with Labour again will be the feeble 50 that we had before, who went on to line their own pockets, and most of them ended up in the House of Lords. We need politicians in Scotland who work for Scotland, who are like, at the stalk of Blackpool Rock, that wherever you cut it, you see Blackpool. What we need are politicians where wherever you cut them, you see the saltire and the views of the people of this country, not the views that are there or the aspirations that are there only to assist those lucky people that got on the gravy train and climbed a ladder to the top when they were signally incapable of running a country, because that's what we're left with now. They need swept away overnight if they're not going to change their stripes.
Yeah. For those of the viewers who have never read up on the 1918 UK general election, and I would suggest you go and read it and look at the results that came from the island of Ireland, where the incumbent Irish Parliamentary Party, who were the SNP of the day for Ireland, were swept away in one election by Sinn Féin. And a few months later, Ireland, the minus the 6 counties, declared their independence. There's a lesson there, folks, but we'll know it. Well, not only was this the worst attended SNP conference in donkey's years. I mean, I can't remember, you have to go back quite some time to find one so badly attended. But what was more telling for me was that Cabinet Minister, for a start, one of them, for example, Angela Constance, the Justice, was not at her party conference. This is almost unheard of. Can you reason with it at all?
No, it just shows you what a non-event it was, and there's an excuse here. There is an excuse here. They don't have the passion that we have. They've just, for example, I'm loving the passion I see. With Allan and Leanne, and we've got it in abundance as well. And I know, Allan, I think you're standing for a position in Alba's ordinary member or whatever. Well, good luck with it, because that's the kind of passion we need. Just as Eva said, cut someone through. You should see the soul tire. You should see them bleeding for the people, for something they believe in, something they're willing to fight for, and something they're critically willing to stand up and be seen, to articulate that passion that has been so devoid. When you look at there's nothing there. They're empty vessels. They're making the most of the noise, and all they're doing is feeding their own self-interest. So no, what we need is a dramatic change in course in SNP. And historically, the traitors would have been hung, drawn, and quartered, as we know. But obviously, they need to be removed, but obviously in a non-violent way, in a political way. But this meeting, this conference, shows the sham that is the SNP supporting independence right now, because it's walked away from the prime directive, from its very, very raison d'etre. It no longer drives for independence, and that's why the people are turning away in their droves. Now, do the individuals care? Well, conference is critical. If you understand politics, to see folk, to network, to find out what's going on, and just as critically, to be seen politically. So why would key players avoid it? Well, because that's not happening anymore. Now, there is an excuse here, a wee bit. It started with COVID. That was the excuse for not to attend and for a change of rules. Because this is, when you look at how the SNP has been deconstructed from within, first removal of the power of the people to make the selection, and Angus Robertson, you are the hand that turned that and stabbed us in the back on that one and destroyed the power of the people to make selection. And that's where we lost our power and motivation to be involved, because we no longer could make the changes. And this is perfect. This whole COVID, this excuse is perfect to avoid change, to avoid being challenged, to avoid accountability, and critically to retain the status quo, which is that which the establishment and perfidious Albion has enacted in these useless. They're called leaders. They can't lead us anywhere. They're not leading anyone. I wouldn't follow these people to any. I wouldn't hire them as my assistant. Some of these clowns. I mean, really. I mean, and I understand it in political, but it's volunteers. It's hard to get people to be motivated because they're doing it for free. We pay big money in the oil industry, and I still find it hard to get people to do what I want. So you can imagine how hard it is to herd the cats when you're trying to organise a political party. So yes, I understand there are excuses, but the failures of the SNP under Nicoll and Humza, etc., listed there by all, and most recently by Eva, and the alliance with the idiot Greens are well documented. And we shouldn't just say the Greens. We should always preface that with idiot Greens from here on in, because they are idiots. And we should, if you really cared about what the people want, and you really believed in, look at all the abandoned idiot ideas and philosophies and policies. You get the odd decent one that's sensible, but most of them are the idiot Greens, full stop. Let's remove them. They need to get out of government, and we need to stand on our own 2 feet and elect those who are willing to represent the will of the people. Long overdue.
Talking of the level of quality within the SNP, Keki, can you stick up that quick clip of Miss Given, the latest sort of poster girl of the SNP, where she makes her brilliant faux pas on national television, saying we need to hit people in the pocket. And you got it.
About it. What did you make of the announcement? I think it's really positive. I think, we're in the midst of the worst cost of living crisis in a generation, and people need policy that is going to hit them in their pockets now. I think, the Scottish Government have been clear that they're working on longer term council tax reform with CLOSLA and the joint working group, and that will come in time. But right now, the public need a policy that is going to hit them in the pocket, and this is.
They need a policy that's going to hit them in the pocket. There you go. Yeah, they're not suffering enough. Let's stick it to them more. I know it's a slip of the tongue. We've all done it. But, this is something they're putting forward, Lloyd. But the other one is, didn't turn up. And it worked on a couple, two. One, a stalwart who's been in the party for years, committed so deeply to the independence movement. Alec Neil didn't bother turning up. But the one that got another one was Kate Forbes, a would-be leader, one who we know, and people can say, how do you know? We know, is on manoeuvres. And is sort of lining up, waiting for whom's it to fall over. All sorts of shenanigans going on. She didn't turn up. She found that going to a British-American course, and people might need to know what a British-American course is like, was more important than her party conference.
Well, this is the big indicator, Roddy. You keep away from, well, historically, you keep away from conference if you're going to get a hard time, or you keep away from conference because you don't want to be seen to be on manoeuvres at conference. But the deeply worrying thing with Kate Forbes is she has provided us with the Free Ports Agreement, which most people know very, very little about. It's going to have huge, enormous effects on the country and has never been brought to account for it whatsoever. But the interesting thing is Kate Forbes believes that a week-long meeting of the British-American Partnership, which is a structure created by the American State Department to find like-minded, cozy-up politicians in other countries, particularly in this case, Britain. Kate's been a member of the British-American Partnership for a number of years now, and I would question, if I were I am, so I can question. I'm a member of the Scottish National Party. What was the Cabinet Secretary for Finance doing at a meeting in Liverpool when she should have been at the party conference, developing policy, explaining the free ports to our members and to our people, but she wasn't. And that shows you what the priority is. There are some of these people who believe that they are what they would term international relations are of more importance than the members of their party, the people of this country, and the delivering of independence. And this can only happen because of particular attitudes, and they're attitudes that are not exemplified by either Allan Petrie or Leanne Tervit, who fully understand that you will deliver independence by delivering the good news message to the mass of the people of the country. What scared the middle classes, and that's you, Kate, was what happened in 2014, when working people showed their power, came out and voted in numbers they hadn't voted for a huge number of years, something that's not been properly and more importantly, talked about since 2014. When you analyse the results, we came as close as we did because ordinary working people who hadn't voted for years and years came out on the promise of a new world, a new life, and a future for their children. Since then, the only lesson we have, bar the 2015 general election, when those same people came out and delivered 56 members, Scottish National Party members of Parliament, and then since then, they've stayed at home because we are offering them nothing. And so long as we have the likes of Kelly Given, the likes of Kate Forbes, the likes of Jenny Gilruth, these middle-class missionaries who think they know better than the working people of the country, people with no central political core. What are they? I'm a social democrat. Explain that to me. When was the last time one of them could even explain what their central principles were, unlike some of the people, well, Leanne for one, right? this country is not moving forward so long as the managerial middle class are comfortable managing the country, because devolution is management. It's not governance. And anybody that pretends that they're a government is a liar and a fool and should not be in a job. This is management, and management is destroying our country and our people's future.
Here, well said. Also, another one that didn't turn up was the big darling of the party, that great socialist, they said, Mary Black, who someone, the techies told me, was at home eating Kit Kats, whatever that means. She certainly wasn't at the conference. Allan, you've been to many an SNP conference. You remember the buzz of them. It was the highlight of the year. Now, if you went to your conference next week, in Glasgow for Alapa, and Alex Salmon didn't turn up, and Kenny McCaskill didn't turn up, and Neil Hanvey didn't turn up, you wouldn't exactly be feeling confident, would you?
No, when your stalwarts don't turn up, that means there's something going drastically wrong with your party. But I mean, when you said Mary Black is a socialist, that's within the party sense, because the left parties have moved that much right that they're now Thatcherite.
I was being facetious, Allan,
there's
very
a massive
facetious.
gap of the real left, and we has to fill that position, the real left, not where the parties have gone, because the parties have just moved that far onto the right. Tories are now fascists, Labour are now Thatcherites, and the SNP and Greens are just neoliberals. We have this left part that is just calling out for people to come out and vote, because when you fill that part, you bring in the hope, you tell them the differences that you're going to be. I mean, given a freeze on the council tax, yeah, that's going to save some people money. It's not going to save the lowest money because they already get tax rebate. They still have to pay the increase in the water charge, but you have the option, well, the Scottish Government have the option of bringing in a more progressive tax system, the way Alpa has in their policy that was put forward, I think it was Stirling, whereas the lowest paid pay a wee bit less, the highest paid pay a little bit more, and it's graded for how much you earn as how much tax you pay. Because I'm getting sick and tired of these people that are on high earners that are saying, if we have to pay any more tax, we're leaving the country. Well, just go, because your greed's not welcome in this country. We want a prosperous nation for every single one of our citizens. None of our citizens should be starving to death. None of our citizens should be freezing to death. Our country is rich in resources and finances. And what we're going to lose with the SNP's proposal for the council tax is going to be services. Because poverty, like Eva said earlier on, poverty is not just about money. It's about service provision as well. If you're stuck into a postcode that you're going to get a service, that is no use. People are going to suffer with cuts in council budgets. Where Alex Salmon was different was when he brought in the phrase of council tax, he also gave the money to the local government to make it up. And it was a case of you couldn't use this money for anything else except for freezing the council tax. So don't cut any more services. That money's for that. But Humza, just off the whim of the top of his head, without even speaking to anybody, including Cosler, just decided to grab a press headline. And that's all that was about. He's not really thought about how to really deal with poverty in our schemes, possibly because he's never in the schemes.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely do. You're right, Allan. They play for the headline for the day, and without the thinking about the consequences or the long-term effects. But Leanne, I mean, when you add in the payroll who would have to go to the SNP conference, and they've got a huge payroll, I mean, it's such a bad crowd. Is the problem been they've been in power too long and that they're living in a bubble that they really genuinely, I want to give them every, it's a party I was in for 5 decades. I want to give them every chance possible. Isn't it that they've been living in a bubble too long that they don't realise the absolute pain and suffering that's gone out there in the scheme?
But I mean, look at who's been platformed in the party just now. You mentioned Kelly Given, and saying to hit people hard in the pockets. Now, I know it was a bit of a sort of faux pas that she made there, but language is important. And somebody sitting watching there that's really struggling and got anxiety and depression and wondering, thinking that they're going to get hit even harder in the pockets is quite a dangerous thing to be coming out with. It's absolutely crazy. The conference, the attendance, even the attendance online was disgraceful. I think it was about 150 people. I was one of them for a section of that. Was that conference not also meant to be their emergency conference on independence after it kept getting put back and put back and put back after the Supreme Court ruling as well? So I mean, this conference should have been really, really important to people. And when you've got cabinet ministers and that not showing up, what does that tell you? The people that they've got, that they're showing, that they're platforming and that haven't got a clue what's going on at ground level. They've not got a clue what poverty is. I've said it before, and I hate this statement saying that they're going to lift thousands out of poverty. I mean, that just means chucking an extra few quid at them a week, and that's not lifting anybody out of the situation that they're in. Poverty isn't just the money, like Allan said. It's the services, it's the housing, it's the addictions, the suicides, it's the lack of hope and opportunities. We're not all born equal. There's kids there at primary school got a huge gap in opportunities to the people that have got to the people that haven't. It's just unfair, and SNP are doing nothing. This conference that they had, I mean, when their own people can't go, when their own staff and that can't turn up, and Kate Forbes and Constance and what have you, then what does that say for the rest of them? It's just the only ones that were there were just the faithfuls and probably the Sturgeonites that have just moved on to Humza. I mean, you've seen the reception she got. I was sickened, absolutely sickened by it. It's Mary Black not showing up. But then does she show up to anything? I've heard that she's not exactly a grafter when it comes to anything, and she makes it that she comes from a working class background, and that she doesn't come from the working class background that I come from. It's completely different. There's no similarities there. Her upbringing wasn't council, it just wasn't. But yet she plays that part, which it's quite sickening to watch, and she does reel folk in by what she says. But she's just pound shop council. I'm real deal council.
It's, talking on that, Eva, I mean, of the 150, I would say, actually, viewers who are watching this at the moment on YouTube, you'll find we've got more than 150 viewers here. And 150, of that 150, God knows how many would be journalists, actually, lazy journalists taking it in. 72,000 members and only 150 watching. Bad show. But Eva, Leanne touched on it. On the week that we joked about and tongue-in-cheek about no ifs, no buts referendum, where Sturgeon had let us down, she arrived, not a care in the world, walking down the stairs with her entourage, her sycophantic brown-nosers, as if the big I am here, aren't you all lucky that I am deemed to be here? It was quite nauseating. She should have, of all weeks, she should have used that opportunity to apologise to people in Scotland that the no ifs, no buts didn't happen. But no, it was all about me, this, I. Vomitable.
What she should have done to regain or have a chance of regaining a very slight modicum of respectability would have been to expose herself to half a dozen Leannes and Allans, and they could interrogate her and ask her how many people are homeless in Scotland today, how many children in Scotland live in poverty, how many children go to school hungry, how many single working poor are too skint to pay their bills and have some extra money left for the end of the week. She can't answer any of that because she's completely out of touch, like, as we've said so many times, so many others round about her. And Scotland desperately needs politicians who are capable, who are honest, and who understand the problems that the country's got. I mean, very recently, I was speaking to an orthopaedic surgeon who explained to me that in the course of the last few years, the dreadful changes that there have been in the NHS are to an extent incapable, or he's incapable of understanding what's gone so badly wrong, other than to say that there are too many managers. He told me that he used to do 5 artificial hip joint or knee joint operations in a day pre-pandemic. He and all his colleagues now do 3. So the backlog's getting bigger. More and more people are waiting for longer and longer. Some of them are starting to turn to private health provision. But this particular surgeon knows that part of the issue is down to not having enough nursing staff, not having enough anaesthetists, not having a proper system in place whereby bed blocking can be eradicated, not having care homes that are appropriately managed and equipped and manned, not paying care home workers enough of a wage. All of that stuff is able to be fixed if there's the political will and the desire to address it properly. But we don't have that here. What we've got is a First Minister, like the last one, who thinks if you make grandiose announcements about flinging money at something, that'll fix the whole system. It never ever will. Flinging money at the NHS won't fix it. What it needs is an overhaul by people who understand processes and systems and medical need. The social work service is similar. Police Scotland is becoming similar too, because there are resource problems and there are man management problems. It's not just about money. Just like poverty is not just about money, it needs clear thinking, it needs strategy, it needs folk who know the game. Now, when I say I was speaking to, a doctor who told me such and such, I was also speaking to a young woman who had cause to contact the local police because there was a serious ongoing incident affecting her. And she was told they couldn't come to see her that day. In fact, she'd be lucky if they saw her the following day. They eventually saw her about 3 days later. And the guy that was causing the problem was dealt with. But that's the local police in central Scotland that cannot attend a fairly urgent, quite worrying incident. There are social workers who go off their shift at night shattered because there aren't enough of them to do the job the way it needs to be done. These things are only going to get worse when we're led by incompetent fools, which is exactly where we are. And the fact that even, I think you said the Cabinet Secretary for Justice wasn't at the conference when there are innumerable aspects of Scottish justice that need to be considered, debated and improved, just about says it all for me. It's a government that's lost its way and our country deserves so much better.
Yeah, it should. But what, moving on from the conference, if I may, Phil, what did happen this week, and if I go back to Stuart Campbell, probably the best journalist in the UK, and certainly the best journalist in the independence movement, he managed to do a correlation between the dipping of the SNP and the GRRB bill and the Isle of Brighton, etc., in prison and all that stuff. Now, this week, the butcher from the border and the paedophile, Andrew Miller, was jailed for 22 years for a horrific attack on an 11-year-old child. That's some hope there. This guy, 22 years, he was always walking about dressing as a woman, but and even worked in his butcher shop while dressed as a woman and behaving and acting and pretending to be a woman. Could you also take a stick up from his Shona Robson's famous quote? There is no evidence that predatory and abusive men have ever had to pretend to be anything else to carry out abusive and predatory behaviour, said Shona. The judge said something different, Phil. The wee lassie had said if she hadn't seen a woman in that car, she wouldn't have got into the car. She felt safe because it was a woman. Should Shona Robinson apologise and immediately resign?
She should have resigned in March when she said that. That was one of the most absurd things that I've ever heard. Absolute nonsense to say something as stupid as that and so patently wrong. I mean, it's so obvious to all of us that that was the opposite of what she should have said. And she's standing up for some cause that there are rights in that cause. There are rights in that cause, standing up for the rights of people who are going through the process. There are rights there, and we support individuals going through, if they wish to self-ID, that's where we have an issue. That's where we've got an issue, and that's what she was standing up for wrongly in our opinions, and the people also agree that it's completely wrong. And I don't usually call for scapegoats, You know, I don't want the person at the top of the minister to resign for a policy that was set by a party. I look for the mechanism and who actually implements it, who's pulling the strings. These are the people that need to pay the price. But here, when you come out with something as stupid as that and patently wrong, and it's a lie, she lied. She said something that is absurd. And as a result of that, we now face this situation. Now, I'm not saying she caused this man to do what he did. But this man is taking advantage of the naivety and the foolhardiness of people who should know better. And when you're in a position that Shona Robertson is in right now as a minister, she should know better, and she doesn't. Therefore, she's not fit for the job that she's currently in. So yeah, she should be long gone.
Yeah, it's Lloyd. I just can't believe, you know, we've got cabinet minister not turning up the conference and another cabinet minister after something as serious as this. She didn't do the honourable thing and say, I'm out. It's not just that she said that. The whole way through that bill going through Holyrood, she was pushing it, and was ignoring people trying to warn her that this is exactly what would happen.
The worst thing about this, Roddy, is that, you know, Shona Robertson is Nicola Sturgeon's best friend of 3-4 decades nearly. And I'm watching somebody that, when I knew her, was a community worker in Govan. You know, she's not somebody divorced entirely from the world. Shona's background, her parents, I believe, were members of the Communist Party in Dundee, legendary Communist Party members in Dundee. She understands these issues, but her blindness, because of her friendship with Nicola, has led her into a place where I'm sure she has nightmares about it. And and I look at her and I see somebody who is frightened. You can see in her eyes, she knows she's not telling the whole truth and that she's not utterly committed to what she's saying. But she's in a world of panic where if she says what I think she really believes, then the dam bursts. And that decades-long friendship is well over and done with. But we also all know that there's other things underneath all of this. Nobody appeared out of nowhere one day and suddenly said to the leadership of the Scottish National Party, what you really need to do is you need to get behind the movement for men's rights, pretending to be transgender rights. You need to get behind this. That was not something that naturally grew up from within the SNP. This has been imported from somewhere by someone. And until we get to the bottom of that, we'll never know why we are in this madness, for want of a better description of it. But Shona can't resign. I'm sure in her mind, she said, if I resign, God almighty, who will they replace me with? Because the talent pool is, it's disappearing in the sun. It's evaporating before our very eyes. Also, if she's taken away from the protection of being a cabinet secretary, then maybe some of the questions about her actions over the attempted jailing of Alex Salmond would be asked. And when it comes right down to it, there's a group of people who, what binds them is the actions that they took in that particular circumstance. And it's like a suicide pact because they're tied into it, they can't walk away from it, and they know. And I saw it in Shona Robertson's eyes the other day. She knows it's coming back and it's going to haunt the lot of them for the rest of their lives. But she has to resign. She has to resign. For goodness sake, Frank McAveety had to resign because he ate a pie in the canteen and missed a question. First Minister's question, 2002. Henry McLeish had to resign because he sublet his office from a trade union. They didn't actually break any rules, but the fact was it ended up in the papers. And those were the days when people took action based on what the common feeling outside was, that you had, for want of a better word, you had a level of honour. Nobody resigns now. You brass it out. And the new SNP leadership have learned brassing it out from the great brasser-outer herself, who made that ridiculous entrance at Aberdeen, as if She was the imagery of it was fantastic. It was, you know, like descending from heaven down the stairs. It was just absurd. But Shona, tell the truth. Do yourself a favour. If you were a Catholic, go to confession. But the first thing you need to do is resign.
Absolutely. You're a Dundee man, Allan. What's the local feeling on Shona Robinson? Are the locals wanting to see her go?
Well, not only a Dundee man, I used to be Shona Robinson's press officer when she was first elected as an MSP, and I refused to allow her to talk to the press. I dealt with all press because Shona, I don't think, has ever had an original political thought in her life. She will go and she will ask civil servants and take their word as gospel. But she's not even good at putting it across sincerely, because you know she's telling a lot of lies, and half the time she doesn't even understand what she's talking about. If she's actually cross-examined, she's up shit creek without a paddle, to be honest with you. And that's the biggest problem that we've got. I mean, in Dundee, she's never been seen. We had a few years ago, one of our respite units for children with exceptional complex medical needs was on the verge of closing. I ran the campaign to keep that open. But I knew Shona was the health minister at the time. I knew if I just went to her, that would all be swept under the carpet. So what I did was I organised a meeting with every single MP, MSP and councillor that was elected to represent the area, and we called a full meeting with the whole lot of them around the campaign. That way she couldn't sweep it under the carpet, because there was no way Labour or the Tories or the Lib Dems or even the Greens at that stage were going to allow her to do that. So we managed to save the complex because we did that kind of campaigning. And again, because she couldn't listen to the civil service, because we were telling her straight how things were working and we were showing her the evidence. But even on issues like the GRR, that's not coming. I don't think that's coming from political level. I think that's coming from the civil service level, who are in cahoots with the millionaires in America and all these meetings that they're attending to, saying joint working groups. Nonsense. You're just trying to manipulate people and run and take our power away from us. I mean, I think it was Jimmy Reid that once said, you cannot have freedom unless you have the ability of choice. And until you get the finances in place where everybody's out of poverty, everybody has the same opportunities, then we will eventually get freedom. But without that, independence is going to be nothing unless we change the entire system. And that means we tell the civil servants what to do, not the other way around. We put our policies forward and we say to them, fulfill them and get them in place now.
You're also up there in Dundee, Leanne. Would you go out and campaign and say, I think that no men would be predatory if they were given a chance? Would you dare to say that in the doorsteps?
I'm a Fifer, Roddy.
Oh,
I'm in
sorry.
Fife. I agree with Phil. When Shona Robinson made that speech, that's when she should have resigned. Everything that was in that speech was a load of lies. Predatory men will use every opportunity to get to their prey, to get to these kids. Religious, the people will pretend to be religious to get into the priesthood. You'll have people going into the scout leaders. You'll have stepdads jumping in pretending to be loving husbands and fathers, and that they'll use any opportunity and they'll pretend to be anything at all to gain easier access to these kids. Just up the road for me in Asda was Katie Dolotowski, and along the road in Kirkcaldy, and this man went into the female toilets up there to abuse a couple of lassies. Now that's changed their lassies' lives forever. It's not just changed their lassies' lives; it's changed their lives as an adult. You know, that stays with them forever. And for Shona Robinson to come out with that, it was absolutely sickening. Yes, she should resign straight away. She should have resigned back then.
Yeah. Eva, I've heard women talking, and there's not, and I'm sure the women can relate to it. Men can't. But there's not a woman in this God's earth that hasn't crossed the street when she's been on her own and seen a man or some men coming towards her. You know, that take different routes home, who don't like to go anywhere where there's not lots of lighting, lots of people, all those things. So women know there's a danger from men. Absolutely. That's where the danger comes from. How could someone, a female, you know, turn around like Shona and say, "Oh, men wouldn't do that." It just is. I mean, when she was saying it, she must have known she was lying.
The difficulty is that she would preface that by saying, "Not all men," or she would say, "But trans-identifying men aren't men; they're women." That's the get out. That's the mantra. I would like to slightly rewind though, Roddy, because I find it really, in common with probably every person on the planet that's read it so far, stomach churning to read the full sentencing statement from the judge, Lord Arthurson. So I would recommend that every adult reads it, and then if you've got the time, email it to your MSP, especially if it's an MSP that voted in favour of the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, because it will turn your stomach if you have compassion in your heart at all for that wee lassie and her family and all the people that worried about her. You'll cry all the way through it, but there'll be tears of rage as well as great sorrow and sympathy. It is behaviour that is utterly vile and depraved, as narrated by the judge and as reflected in the sentence, which is in total 28 years, 20 years inside, followed by 8 years on supervision. It is a truly horrific act and a horrendous set of circumstances that wee girl was put through. And that line you've already quoted from Lord Arthurson is one that should haunt Shona Robson, as we've said, Nicola Sturgeon for sure, and my MSP, the former Cabinet Secretary for Justice, Keith Brown, because he's the guy that said that the chap Graham, alias Bryson, was female and entitled to be in Corntonvale Prison, with no regard whatsoever to the needs and the rights of the female prisoners who were there. Now, remember, day after day, we had this charade in the Scottish Parliament, in every interview that Sturgeon or Brown or others around them gave, where they insisted that when people tell us what they are, we ought to believe them. There was no room for, consideration of predatorial behaviour in the context of the GRR. We had, what's his name? Alex Cole Hamilton waving to the people in the balcony.
We did it for you, Beth.
We did it for you, Beth. Now, none of that is saying that any of these other people who supported reform are criminals. I'm not saying that they're predators. What I'm saying is that every girl and every woman in the world, but especially in Scotland, deserves to be safe from predators. Yes. And self-identification does not allow that to be the case when there are no safeguards. And the SNP and the Scottish Greens had the ability to keep safeguards in place, and every amendment that would have done that was knocked back. So, the judge said the wee girl wouldn't have got into the car if she thought you were a man. She got into the car because she thought you were a woman. It says it all. Men, no men, doesn't matter who they are or what they are, no man has a right to invade the privacy, the safety, the services of a woman. End off. It is non-negotiable. If Keith Brown doesn't resign, and Shona Robson doesn't resign, and Nicola Sturgeon doesn't resign this week, that'll tell us all we need to know about the values, the intellect, the ambition, the aspirations of these politicians, and what they really think about the needs of the women and the children of this country. It is a disgrace.
Here it is. Some people have said to me, why do you get bothered when it's a women's matter? Well, I'll tell you why. I've got a wife, I've got 3 granddaughters, and I had a mother. And that is why I get involved. And I'm with the sisters the whole way, because it affects us all. We're coming towards the end. Time's always beating us, as you know, Phil. And I know you want to get back to the beach, the rum and cokes, and the big doobies. So we'll speed up. But there's something I have to mention. I'm no great lover of unionists, as you know, and particularly the Labour Party. I have not forgiven them for their 50 years of absolute disgraceful treatment of my country. However, this week they showed that there's some life there and there's some honour talking. And, for any USNP people watching, maybe pay attention, and any other people who would try and run roughshod over their party, the democracy of their party, for the people who want to be democratic in their party, 9 Labour members of the Glasgow Kelvin branch all resigned, including someone who's a lady, which means nothing to me. Because Starmer has forbidden any debating on Palestine, it doesn't matter what the issue is, Phil. The fact is that the leader said you can't debate because that could maybe affect us badly. And these people have had the honour and the backbone to say, well, no, I'm sorry, I'm out of here. And I applaud them. And I do applaud them for their action.
Yeah, there's clear parallels here with what we've just discussed with Shona and the SNP, and then it's about freedom of speech. It's about the right and the obligation to stand up for what is right and to put principle before party. For the SNP, it's independence, nothing less, before the party. That's why we've all left in our droves. That's why the SNP is floundering, because it abandoned and betrayed that core principle. And here you have something as core in principle and as... See, this is the thing about politics. It's your duty and obligation to, as adult politicians, to address the difficult subjects. And this is why freedom of speech includes the right to offend. Because if you're talking about something as emotive as Palestine and Israel and what's currently going on, and the horror of what is going on there right now by the doings of some evil men, and you cannot sit by and watch everyone being cast by the same cloud, the same black mark on all Palestinians when it's Hamas who have done this, or a certain group of people within Hamas. So the dehumanization, we cannot allow that to happen as civilized human beings, and this is fundamental. It comes down to the fundamental right that we've just been talking about. It's freedom of speech. So to excuse Shona and let her away with something as fundamentally as wrong as that based on loyalty to the party is something I can't permit. We all agree. I don't subscribe to the particular management philosophy of party first. I've done it and I've admitted it. One of those things I disagree with. When it comes down to core principles, though, you cannot in good conscience allow something as critical as women's rights or the freedom of your country and your people to be disavowed, to be removed, and to back it and not stand up for it. And there's some classic quotes. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they don't want to hear, right? George Orwell. You've got to sometimes, as adults, stand up and say what's difficult. And the classic Oscar Wilde quote, I may not agree with you, but I'll defend to the death your right to make an arse of yourself. So if you want to go and talk about GRR and come out with idiot statements, Shona, I'll back you I'll back your right to come out with crap like that, but then you'll be out the door with the scruff of the neck, you clown, for this idiocy. And you should be accountable for your actions or inaction. And thanks for the insight, Allan. That was very, very, very illuminating. But as we say, critically, freedom of speech is the right with which we protect all other rights. And we have seen it eroded in all the political parties. And this example in Labour is just another example of them selling out and being different cheek of the same arse and following that American system, the two-party state. So what we really want is, we had SNP that was different, but now we can see that's eroded now in the SNP. That fourth righteousness, this fourth, the principles that we once stood for are gone in the SNP. They're no longer there. And this is the neutering, the deliberate neutering of what was once the key leader in the independence movement. The radical socialist SNP is no more.
Correct. I'll let it run a couple more minutes so if I get the last answer from you, Lloyd, in this, because I'll come on to why we need to let it run a wee bit longer for people. But the other thing that Starmer's been saying to his people is that MPs, you can't go to a pro-Palestine demonstration. And so what I think is more, again, these 9 people who I applaud, is the fact that the Labour movement were not to go to anti-war demonstrations. They're not to talk about CND or, getting rid of tribe and anything like that. Things have changed and it's just wrong. And these people have to be applauded.
It's the destruction of politics. It's the first thing that takes people's belief in politics and their trust in politicians away, is when you shut down debate and argument. The destruction of Jeremy Corbyn by the Israeli lobby and the Israeli security services, along with the assistance of Keir Starmer and a number of bad actors in the Labour Party, has led the Labour Party to this position. But what really led it was Keir Starmer's desperate ambition to be Prime Minister. Effectively, he's shown that he will do anything to get that position. He's allowing his politics to be dictated by what may or may not be on the front page of the Metro tomorrow morning. Now, when you do that, instead of fighting back against that, then you begin to trim policy, you begin to trim the internal democracy, and effectively what you're saying to the electorate is, don't trust us because we don't let our own people talk about stuff, and that's what we'll end up doing to you. You know, in your midweek programme, Roddy, you had... you got Craig Murray on, who, you know, was subject to detention, which is not arrest, but if he tries to leave, then it's illegal. This bizarre bill, which Starmer was an essential central part of. Now, in any political party, if you shut down debate, you're on the road to ruin. That's all there is to it. There's no escaping it, which is why I loved many years ago my time in the SNP, because there was constant debate. There was constant friction over ideas. But we all knew when it came the day, the X went in the right box. When the by-election came, we all knew where we needed to be. You know, I shared platforms with people I could barely bring myself to speak to, because it was about unity of purpose and it was about free speech. The right to hold a view, and as Phil often says to us, the right to hold views that people find offensive. But the fact of the matter is, it's politics. It's about things that are offensive. That's just a reality of it. I mean, that's enough for me.
Right, well, talking of things that we find offensive, I find this offensive, but we're going to end on this matter with you, if I may, Eva. And that's your equivalent as Equalities Officer in the SNP has been elected. Amber, whatever Amber's second name, I can't remember. Can we have the picture of Amber, the lady who's now the Equalities Officer for the SNP? Have you got that there, Techie? Apparently not. No, we don't have a picture. I've been just told by Techie. But you know, it's actually a male person, Eva.
Amber is a man who says he's a trans-identifying man, so he would refer to himself as being a trans woman. And I think he was standing for election to be the SNP Equalities convener, but he didn't win that place. He was also standing to be a women's representative on the SNP NEC. So he stood against a woman for the job. He didn't get that job, but there was a bit of a furore online via social media particularly, because very many people were saying that as a man who does not have a gender recognition certificate, Amber ought not to have been allowed to compete for a woman's place. And that's the difficulty within the SNP and the Scottish Government, obviously comprising the SNP and the Scottish Greens, where they continue to implement self-identification for people without a GRC, even although that is absolutely not the law. It's what has happened in a number of jobs that are advertised by the government or on behalf of the government that are supposed to be restricted by dint of sex, and that's quite often a very valid restriction, but they're using a self-identification definition so that men who say they're women are able to apply for jobs that are actually restricted to females. But that is Scotland 2023, thanks to Nicola Sturgeon, Shona Robson, Keith Brown and very many others who've been absolutely duped and hoodwinked by the most dangerous, pathetic, demented ideology that the planet has perhaps ever seen. And for, I hope, the only time in my life, I hope that Westminster wipes the floor with the Scottish Government in the legal challenge.
I'm sure they will. We've come to the end. We've well overrun our time, as we have. And the reason I did, folks, is because the good news and bad news. The bad news is there'll be no Prism show next week. We had hoped to have a show at the Alapa conference with a live audience, and in conjunction with Glasgow LACU, we tried our best, but circumstances and obstacles and all sorts of other things were put in our way, and we were sadly and regrettably, and not by the choice of Prism, able to bring you a show with a live audience next week. I'm sorry about that. However, we will be in attendance. So there are several hostelries. We will put it out on our social media where the Prism crew will be gathering for refreshments and libations, and we'll be delighted to see some of you there. And on the midweek show next week, we will have a show after conference, that is, on the conference. I will bring a group of people from the conference, maybe some elected, maybe some didn't get elected. And we'll have a wee chat about the conference and bring you an update and our views on that and on matters appertaining to that. So we look forward to seeing you all next week in Glasgow, in my dear old city. And till we do, you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.